The all-party parliamentary group against the death penalty seeks to campaign and argue against the use of the death penalty anywhere in the world. We think it's an international human rights issue, so we're quite keen to use whatever chances we have to talk in other countries and enter into a dialogue with them. The UK has traditionally been opposed to the death penalty. We are, after all, members of the EU and the Council of Europe, and that requires abolition of the death penalty for all member states. And I think very progressively the British government, both the coalition and the previous government, have felt that this is an important Foreign Office responsibility to spread the word in other countries. So we're ahead of many others, but we collaborate with other EU countries in order to achieve the end. Well, it's quite puzzling as to why countries that are democracies and that believe in human rights continue with the death penalty. I think the United States is a bit different. It's almost an exception. Most of the countries that are heavy executors are some of the less pleasant dictatorships in the world. Now, Japan has actually used the death penalty relatively little. We're still using it. I think it's a pity. I'm told that here the arguments are that public opinion won't have it and so on. But the arguments are very similar to those that were used in Britain many years ago when we came to abolish the death penalty. So there's nothing all that different. And I think in the end it's up to politicians to take the lead and to say that taking life by the state is wrong in principle. It's a moral issue, as well as the more pragmatic arguments that sometimes you execute a person who turns out to be innocent. That's happened. It's happened in Britain, happened elsewhere. And the other argument that it might deter. Well, frankly, there's no evidence that the death penalty deters. Well, obviously it's something that we've considered. I was in the House of Commons in London when we had an attempt to bring back the death penalty. I think it was in the early 1980s, and all these arguments were deployed, but they didn't persuade Parliament, which voted heavily to continue to abolish the death penalty. Well, people think that it might deter, but frankly, all the studies that have been carried out, including in the United States, say the death penalty doesn't deter. And countries that have imposed a moratorium or abolished the death penalty have not found that there's any significant increase in murders compared to any trends that existed before that. So the answer is yes, there are some very nasty crimes that are committed, but we still believe, I certainly believe, that the death penalty is not appropriate. Well, I think it's a difficult argument, and it's an important question. First of all, in Britain, as well as in other countries that have abolished the death penalty, public opinion probably still favours the death penalty. The answer is that having abolished it in Britain, public opinion didn't get all excited about it, and although there are occasional suggestions that for a particular heinous crime the death penalty should be brought back, on the whole there's no force behind that. I think it's a case of where politicians have to give the lead, and politicians have to lead the debate and lead public opinion. I think if public opinion was better informed about innocent people being executed by mistake and so on, public opinion might actually be less passionate for the death penalty anyway. But in the end, I think it's a responsibility of politicians to set the standards by which they want to see their country judged in terms of human rights. And I think it is better for a country to say, we live with public opinion being adverse, but we'll try and educate public opinion and inform public opinion. We believe the death penalty is wrong in principle, and if we do declare a moratorium or eventually to abolish the death penalty, we're confident there will be no adverse consequences in terms of the crime rate. Well, I've learned a great deal about attitudes to the death penalty. I've met people who are very much opposed to the death penalty, who are campaigning hard. I've met people who think that the death penalty is on the statute book, therefore it should be exercised. But I think there are doubts in many people's minds. If one starts engaging in a conversation, it is very clear that people are not nearly as certain about it as they profess at the outset, and I think that's important. And I think I've learned that many of the arguments that are being used against the death, against the change, many of the arguments that are being deployed in favour of the death penalty, are actually arguments that we've heard in Britain, France, and other countries for a long time. And we've been there. We've had to deal with public opinion. We've had to make the political decisions. The only regret is that the political voices in Parliament in Japan are not as vocal on this issue as perhaps I would hope they would be. We had some very powerful exponents of abolition in Britain many years ago, and I'm looking for similar powerful Japanese voices among politicians to do the same thing. So I haven't detected as much of that as there might be. But otherwise, I think there's a great similarity between attitudes in Japan and attitudes in Britain, which makes me feel that the possibility of abolishing the death penalty must be there, because other countries have been through that, and Japan has a better human rights record than some countries that have abolished the death penalty. So why not?